Hello, everybody. This is Jono McKinney. It's good to see you all, including Avery Berg, a former classmate of my son. So that's kind of been fun. Um, so I'm the president and CEO for the Montana Conservation Corps, and we are another important partner with the Forest Service. So I'll be talking about that and bringing a little bit more perspectives here. But I did want to go back and reflect a little bit on some of the remarks from Dr. Fiji and Virginia Kelly and Peter Bennett. Highlight is this remarkable little place that encompasses so much of this history we've been hearing about, in this mix of timber and water and so many other uses, including the recreation aspects, and this challenge between balancing kind of the conservation, recreation, and other uses in this really small landscape with increasing uses. So I'll be speaking a little bit about that too, but. First, let me tell you a little bit about Montana Conservation Corps, and I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. So let me see here. Melissa, if you could let me know, or Carol, or actually Carolyn, if you could give me a thumbs up if you're seeing it. There we go. Okay. I think that works. Get things out of the way. So Montana Conservation Corps' mission is to inspire young people through hands-on conservation service to be leaders, stewards of the land, and engaged citizens who improve their communities. Like the Friends of Hyalite, we are also a nonprofit organization. We're based here in Bozeman, but we also have regional offices in Helena, Kalispell, and Missoula, where our crews and our interns serve all across Montana, but actually also in Idaho, Wyoming, and North and South Dakota. So we actually span the Custer Gallatin fully from east to west, but with lots of activities here. And I would say, Montana Conservation Corps, we weave together leadership development, teamwork, civic engagement, and work skills training with direct service on the environment. Those are some of the kinds of projects that we do in places like Hyalite Canyon. And through that, we help young people experience the full measure of their character and discover their capacity to lead changes in their communities, but even more importantly, in their own lives. So I want to go back with a little bit of history also, to the roots of the Conservation Corps movement. And this really started in 1933 when President Franklin Roosevelt created the Civilian Conservation Corps. It was one of the very first of his kind of New Deal programs. And when he created the Civilian Conservation Corps, he said, I propose to create a Civilian Conservation Corps to be used in simple work. So that was actually getting projects done, building trails, bridges, a lot of the infrastructure in our national forests and national parks. But he also added that more important, however, than the material gains, the work done, will be the moral and spiritual value of such work. And that really established this dual mission that youth and conservation corps all across the country still have today. This idea of doing important priority conservation work, largely in our public lands, but balancing that with the development of young people. So that's fundamental to MCC. We really believe in connecting our core members to people, to a sense of their own power, connecting them to place and heritage and culture, and also giving them a sense of future pathways and ways to be engaged in their communities. And we believe that by connecting people to people, power, place, and pathways, we help them connect to a sense of purpose. The kinds of programs that we have include young adult AmeriCorps field crews, our individual placement programs with interns. We have a number of those actually placed with the Gallatin National Forest this summer. We also have a youth corps program for high school students. Avery, you might be one of them. I can't remember if you did our programs or not. And then also we work with different indigenous communities and form partnerships to support opportunities for youth on our reservation communities. What do we do? As you see from this photo, all kinds of different projects. And a lot of that is happening right here in Hyalite Canyon and across the Gallatin National Forest. We do a lot of, obviously the biggest thing we do is a lot of trail work. We do about 1,000 miles of trail maintenance every year. But we're also doing fuels reduction, invasive species work, historic preservation, some visitor use monitoring, and other kinds of resource inventory and study. So a real mix of different kinds of activities. Mostly using traditional hand tools. We're using a lot of the same tools as the folks in the Civilian Conservation Corps used in the 1930s. But as you see, also some chainsaws. Um, so I want to connect this really to our landscape here and why the Conservation Corps and this opportunity to engage young people is really important to the stewardship of places like Hyalite and why it's relevant to this management plan. I was reading through the National Forest plan, and it describes this forest and particularly this area as a world-class wildlands adventure is for world-class wildlands adventures, and that really captures kind of the character. People are traveling from all around the world to come and recreate here. Um, and it is world-class recreation surrounded by the richness of the Yellowstone ecosystem. The forest as a whole has about 3,000 miles of trails from east to west. A lot of that is concentrated pretty close to home here. And it is the number one recreation, has the most recreation visits of any forest in the northern region. Um, 3.5 million visits was in the forest plan, and that was based on 2014. What I found interesting is that in 2009, between 2009 and 2014, they saw a 66% increase in visitation on the Custer Gallatin National Forest. That's an astounding growth. And extrapolating that same growth rate, if we start with the 3.5 million in 2014 and extrapolate that with 66% growth, we're approaching 6 million visitors on the Custer Gallatin National Forest. A lot of those are close to home. 60% of the visitors travel less than 25 miles. So that, most of those people is us. And what's interesting is a lot of the recreation that we see on the Custer Gallatin is described as dispersed recreation. It's people coming here to hike, ride their bikes, mountain biking or road biking, hunting, fishing, enjoying nature, and then in the winter months, skiing and snowmobiling. So the forest has to absorb this very dispersed, wide-ranging form of recreation and manage for that. What's interesting, while we're seeing this incredible growth in use of the forest, and this is just the recreation, keep in mind the Forest Service is still managing for timber, for water, Hyalite Reservoir is our watershed, all these other uses. But over the last decade, the Forest Service here has seen a 15% decline in their operating and recreation budget. And that's what makes groups like the Friends of the Hyalite so critical. 9% less funding for trails, and an overall 28% decline for facilities and maintenance. So a huge management challenge from this increasing use with diminishing resources. Climate change is also adding a whole new factor of challenges with the proliferation of weeds, increasing wildfires, increasing concerns about the ability of our watershed to sustain a growing community like Bozeman. So this, in a key finding in the forest plan is summarized here. Maintenance and capital improvements needed for existing public uses of infrastructure, trails, roads, education, and public service routinely exceeds the fiscal capability of the Custer Gallatin, and the demand for increased recreation opportunities shows no indication of decreasing. So our forest has a big challenge, and this plan is going to be critical to managing these resources. One of the essential, I think, strategies that's articulated in the plan is the increasing need and reliability on partnerships. The forest has about 150 agreements with different partner groups, like Friends of the Hyalite, Montana Conservation Corps, Backcountry Horsemen, all these different kind of groups that can assist in a lot of ways. And the forest is putting out about $4 million with these groups to help accomplish priority work. As Peter said, some of these groups are also helping raise money for the forest, which is critical and essential through different kinds of grants, recreational trails grants, and things like that. But these partnerships are important because they're a way for the forest to get its stewardship and management responsibilities met in a way that is cost savings. It has benefits of increasing community involvement, which helps to address some of the education, helping us as constituents be invested in the care of these forests. And then another aspect, which is important for us at the Montana Conservation Corps, is workforce development. Um, so MCC, a little bit about some of the work that we've done on the Custer Gallatin. Some of that right here in the Hyalite area is we have both conservation interns, anywhere from 3 to 5 to 11-month long individual placements, as well as a crew program. And combined, in 2019, we accomplished, and this is actually forest wide in Region 1 of the Forest Service, a little bit over 1,000 miles of trail work, 2,500 acres of weed treatment, 16,000 hazard trees removed. So that's clearing trails a lot of times. We also are involved in some fuels reduction projects, usually around recreation sites like campgrounds. Um, with MCC, the Forest Service contributes about $2.5 million towards the expenses to support those kinds of activities. So this is a major important partnership for the Forest Service. But in reflection, MCC brings about 3.2 million dollars in a matching share. Some of that is in kind, some of that is also dollars from grants and things like that that we contribute to that overall partnership. So again, emphasizing that with these increasing needs and challenges for the forest, diminishing resources, the role of partners is essential and is emphasized within that management plan. Um, so again, what partners bring is resource stewardship and all kinds of different activities. Peter described some of the cleanup, some of the trail work, um, but also invasive species work, fuels reduction, restoration of different kinds of habitat on the forest. Watershed. One of the interesting projects that we're doing more and more at the Conservation Corps is building what are called these one rock dam analogs. They're they're fake dams, but what we're trying to do is high in watersheds is create small, one rock high dam structures that help keep some of the water higher up in the watershed, so that during our spring runoffs, which are happening earlier and earlier, more of that water is retained higher up in the watershed. Good for habitat, good for forests, frankly, good for our watershed and municipal needs too. So a variety of different kinds of projects there. Some of our interns are also helping the Forest Service with a variety of different visitor use, resource monitoring, inventory kinds of projects. Again, adding to the workforce for the Forest Service. Interestingly, by getting young people involved in these projects, we're helping young people connect to these as a professional career, gaining skills, becoming good leaders in teams who have good communication skills that can be part of the Forest Service workforce. Certainly, we impart a strong work ethic, teaching backcountry and leave no trace skills. And more importantly, and this is an important contribution that the partner makes, the Forest Service makes, is when they work with partner organizations like MCC, they provide a lot of education. Some of that is talking about what are the Forest Service priorities, what are some of the processes to develop these management plans, what are career opportunities within the agency. And so that's important for developing a workforce because a significant proportion of the Forest Service workforce nowadays is eligible to retire. So we really need to create the next generation of forest stewards and Forest Service employees. And these kinds of opportunities to get engaged are really, really critical for that. And then another important piece here is addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is important for MCC in terms of our recruitment, the culture of our crews and programs. And it's a way that we can help these public agencies also become more current, become more diverse, hiring our core members, and address issues of equity to become more inclusive and reflective so that access to this recreation is available to all. Um, But I want to go back to where I started. Let me check my time here. I think I need to wrap up. Um, Going back to the reason President Roosevelt created the Civilian Conservation Corps, he talked about getting simple work done, but then he also said more important than the material gains will be the moral and spiritual value of such work. And that is still very much the core value for us at the Conservation Corps of this kind of work, this opportunity to work on public lands. MCC does not own any public lands. We don't own any of these projects. These are our American public lands, and we're fortunate to have partners like the Forest Service, where that provide us opportunities to involve young people in meaningful work that's challenging, where they have to work together, work through challenges, and develop skills. And that is a really transformational experience. So it's a win-win partnership for these organizations with the Forest Service. And this is just a quote from one of our participants. MCC shaped my mind, work ethic, commitment to the environment, and my own community. MCC instilled a sense of accountability, pride, and purpose when it comes to matters of my community, the environment, and my own impact on every person and the land I engage with. It made me hold myself to a higher standard and to know that I can always make a difference in everything around, no matter how big or small. These kinds of outcomes are part of the value and part of the mission of the Forest Service in developing these kinds of partnerships, because we're developing this next generation of stewards and hopefully a next generation workforce too. I want to conclude here with just a few exciting things I think speak to the future for the Forest Service and these partnerships. One of these occurred last summer. It was the passage of the Great American Outdoors Act of 2020, a big bill to address a lot of the deferred and backlog maintenance needs on our public lands. And that allocates, basically earmarks about $285 million annually for the Forest Service for the next 5 years to invest in rebuilding and improving some of this infrastructure, roads, trails, campgrounds, those kinds of things that are being impacted by so much use. Hopefully, we'll see some of that money coming onto the Gallatin National Forest and right here into Hyalite Canyon, which has so much visitation. The other thing that's very exciting right now is President Biden and his big jobs bill has included a civilian climate corps. So part of that 10 billion proposal is to engage more young people serving on public lands to help improve, the waters, the trails, the recreational assets, the health of our ecosystems, and so on. And so this is a great opportunity for the Forest Service to expand its interest and its commitment to these kinds of partnerships as a way to help support these resources. Again, the forest plan helps us set these priorities and set a future direction. And for the Gallatin National Forest, I think it's going to be really essential, given the limited resources and the high needs. And it's an opportunity for very fruitful partnerships with community groups working with our public lands. All right, thanks, Melissa. That's what I have.